All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at a massive data set that literally maps out the hidden ways smoking attacks the human body. And it's based on the health records of an entire country. And what it found? Well, it's not what you'd think. It reveals two totally separate stories of destruction, one for men and a completely different one for women. Let's see what the data has to show us. This one sentence pulled straight from the analysis is pretty much the entire story in a nutshell. It gets to a really shocking truth. Smoking is bad for everyone, obviously, but how it's bad is just fundamentally different depending on your gender. For guys, it's about the physical structure breaking down. For girls, it's a full-on assault on their future biology.
So, we're going to follow these two completely different paths. On one side, you've got structural decay, a slow, grinding physical breakdown. And on the other, systemic collapse, a rapid biological fire that just burns everything out. Think of them as two separate tragedies, happening at the same time.
Now, this slide right here, I think this just nails it. The male body, when you introduce smoking, is like an old building slowly falling apart. You know, the pipes get rusty, the foundation starts to crumble, but the female body, it's like a city's power grid that gets hit by lightning and the whole thing just overloads and collapses in an instant. And that's not just a cool metaphor. It's exactly what the data shows us.
Okay, so let's start with the male story. This is a journey, decade by decade, of how the body's actual structure begins to rot from the inside out. And it starts way earlier than you'd think, right in the teenage years.
So, the first big shocker from the data is right here, with teenage boys. And forget about lung cancer for a second. The top health problems linked to smoking aren't even about breathing. Number one is physical injuries, fractures. And right behind that are things like turtleneck syndrome, that's literally neck pain from looking down at a screen all day, and frozen shoulder. I mean, these aren't the problems of active kids, they're the aches and pains of a sedentary middle-aged man.
And this tells you, it's not just about the cigarettes themselves, it's the lifestyle that comes with them. The data is painting this picture of teens hunched over screens in gaming cafes for hours, just drowning their stress and anxiety with nicotine. You know, their brains are still developing, especially the part that controls impulses, and nicotine messes with that. So they're more likely to do risky things, which explains all the broken bones. Biologically, their joints are aging like they're 50.
Okay, so let's jump forward into their 20s. The story starts to change. The damage moves from the outside, the bones and muscles, to the inside. And get this, the top-ranked disease for male smokers in their 20s is urinary stones. And right behind that, you see the addiction pattern evolve from just gaming to actual gambling.
You can see the progression, right? That constant need for a dopamine hit that they got from video games as teens now needs a bigger kick, and it morphs into gambling. At the very same time, the body's internal plumbing is starting to fail. Smoking causes chronic dehydration, which leads to these incredibly painful stones. The body's pipes are quite literally getting clogged. And then you see sepsis on the list, which is just terrifying. It's a sign their immune system is already seriously weakened.
Now we hit the 30s, and the decay really starts to accelerate. The target shifts again, this time to the body's most delicate and sensitive parts, especially the eyes. And for the very first time, we see the direct warning signs of a fatal heart attack showing up on the list.
This is where that idea of biological age gets incredibly real and kind of scary. A 30-year-old guy who smokes has the eyes of a 70-year-old. We're talking cataracts, macular degeneration. These are diseases your grandparents get, showing up decades early. And why? Because the tiny, tiny blood vessels that feed your eyes are getting choked off. And you better believe, if it's happening in those tiny vessels, it's also happening in the big ones that feed your heart. That's why heart attack and angina suddenly make their debut.
The 40s, you can think of this as the prequel. It's the final warning shot before the main event, which is often a heart attack in the 50s. The pattern of disease is moving from the delicate outer edges, like the eyes, straight toward the absolute core of the body.
And the data shows this in such a fascinating way. Look at number 2 on the list, frostbite. That's not a coincidence. It's a massive red flag. It means your entire circulatory system is starting to collapse. Blood can't even get to your fingers and toes to keep them warm in the cold. It's a direct message from your body. A 40-year-old man's cold hands are basically a sneak preview of a 50-year-old's heart attack. The blockage is creeping from the edges right to the center.
Okay, now we need to pivot. And I gotta tell you, if the male story was a slow, crumbling decay, the female story is a rapid, total, and frankly, much more tragic collapse.
For teen girls, the data shows something completely different. It's not about physical injuries from taking risks. The number one correlation for them is a future high-risk pregnancy. Number 2 is head lice. And number 3 is anxiety disorder. See, this isn't about what they're doing, it's about the environment they're in and the internal damage that's happening right now. Let's break that down for a second. The link to high-risk pregnancy. That's a biological time bomb being set in their teenage years. Head lice? That's a powerful social marker. It points to neglect, to unstable home lives. And while the boys are externalizing their problems through physical risk-taking, the girls are internalizing their pain. That leads to anxiety, which they then try to soothe with nicotine.
Now we hit their 20s, and the two paths don't just diverge, they fly apart. Remember the guys, in their 20s they're dealing with kidney stones. Yeah, it's painful, but it's a manageable plumbing problem. The data for women in their 20s it's just catastrophic. They're facing life-altering, systemic diseases that shouldn't show up for another 50 years.
What we're seeing here is a total system meltdown. While the male body is still dealing with localized issues, the female body is being attacked on every single front. The liver is failing, which leads to fatty liver disease. The eyes are aging at an incredible rate, with macular degeneration threatening blindness. The blood vessels in the brain are aging so fast that ischemic stroke becomes a real risk in your 20s. And that damage to the reproductive system we saw in the teens, now it's a reality, showing up as postpartum depression.
And then we get to maybe the most terrifying part of this entire map. The 30s for women. They look strangely quiet. There's really only one major thing that shows up: postpartum depression. It's a deceptive calm. Because what happens when we hit the 40s is that the dam just breaks, and an absolute flood of deadly, irreversible diseases is unleashed all at once.
It really plays out like a 3-act tragedy. Act 1 is the 30s, the silent scream. Her body is fighting a war inside, but estrogen, a woman's natural protector, is putting up a heroic shield, masking all the damage. Then, Act 2, the 40s, that shield cracks, and then comes Act 3, the deadly invasion. Pancreatic cancer, one of the absolute deadliest, shoots to number 1. Gout, a disease you almost never see in women before menopause appears, and the immune system turns on itself, sparking autoimmune diseases. It is a total, horrifying collapse.
So why? Why is the female body so much more vulnerable to this kind of crazy, rapid, systemic failure? This isn't just a random pattern. There is very clear medical science that explains exactly why this is happening. The main reason is something called the anti-estrogenic effect. Think of estrogen as a woman's hormonal superpower. It protects her blood vessels, it regulates her metabolism, it keeps her immune system in balance. Well, the thousands of chemicals in tobacco smoke actively destroy that hormone. So what smoking does, effectively, is rob a woman of her primary biological shield. It triggers a premature, aggressive form of menopause that leaves her exposed to catastrophic diseases decades early.
This also helps explain the incredibly dangerous skinny fat paradox. So many women smoke because they believe it helps control their weight. And on the scale, it might look like it's working. But internally, smoking is wrecking their insulin and forcing their body to store fat deep inside, wrapped around vital organs like the liver and pancreas. So they might look thin on the outside, but they are metabolically obese on the inside, which is exactly why we see fatty liver disease and pancreatic cancer showing up so early.
And this really is the bottom line. It all comes back to biological age. A 20-year-old woman who smokes isn't just a 20-year-old who happens to smoke. She can be a 20-year-old living inside a body with the vascular system and the eye health of a 70-year-old. The damage is that profound, and the aging is that accelerated. So, we've just walked through this hidden map of the body, a map that lays out two completely different journeys of destruction. One is a slow, structural decay. The other is a rapid, systemic collapse. The data doesn't lie. It just shows you the paths. So the final question it leaves us with is a really personal one. Which path are you on?